Forbes 30 Under 30 honoree, a 776 fellow, the co-founder and CEO of Trilobio, which just closed an oversubscribed seed round to bring affordable plug-and-play lab automation to every biologist on Earth. Please welcome Roya Amini Naini. Hopefully I said that in the ballpark of correct. Grab yourself. Let's grab you a microphone. For posterity, we'll be recording, so. All right, and then our next guest. He didn't come up through finance like a lot of VCs. He came up as a builder, a designer, a founder, someone who started and sold companies, and who thinks about what it means to build something from nothing. He's a partner at Initialize Capital, one of the most respected seed funds in the Valley, where he focuses on frontier tech, robotics, and founders tackling the genuinely hard problems. Welcome, Andrew Sather. Yeah. Get that man a microphone.
Thank you, Michael. And just as a reminder to everyone who came in, please try to get a name tag. Part of the reason I've been doing so many of these events recently is because I've recently realized how important community is. So I want you all to find a friend at this event, okay? It doesn't have to be now, but afterwards when we're mingling, there should be at least one person who you connect with. You get their contact information, LinkedIn, whatever. And I want you to follow up with that person afterwards, because that is how we get through this. It's a grueling journey as a founder or even an investor, and we can do it together with community. Okay, enough cheese. Roya, your superhero origin story, as Michael mentioned, involves sneaking into a college lab when you were 13. Walk us through that. How did that happen, and how did that lead to founding a company?
Yeah. And okay, good. It's working. So for some context, I started doing genetic engineering when I was around 13 years old. So my parents, they're immigrants from Iran, and they escaped Iran during the dictatorship and came to the U.S. And they would take me and my siblings
the first dictatorship.
The first, yes. And they would take me and my siblings to like protests and rallies, and they instilled in us this need to have a massive positive impact on the world, given that we were born in the U.S. when we had all of this privilege. And at the time, I grew up in Seattle, which is right next to University of Washington, which is a big biotech hub. And CRISPR was unveiled to the world. And so gene editing became actually feasible because it was precise for human gene editing and to develop gene therapies. So we would see posters and magazine articles about how scientists were using CRISPR to solve these seemingly impossible problems in the world, like childhood blindness. And I thought to myself, like, that's how I'll have that positive impact. Because as a 13-year-old, I couldn't do much about a dictatorship in a foreign country. So I emailed a bunch of professors trying to get into their labs to learn genetic engineering. And surprisingly enough, they weren't too keen on a child roaming around their pathogen laboratory. So
Liabilities.
Exactly, the legality of it. But I saw a poster about an interest meeting for a research team at University of Washington that was doing synthetic biology, which is just another word for gene editing, essentially, in bacteria and microbes and even mammalian cells. And so I showed up at that interest meeting, and I ended up joining the team, and we worked on developing biosensors for shellfish toxins, developing chemotherapeutics by engineering yeast. And throughout this time doing all of this work, I would see these students and professors who were so excited to change the world with this new technology end up abandoning their research, not because it was disproven, but because of human error. So then when I went on to Harvey Mudd, where I studied mathematical and computational biology, I started a robotics and genetic engineering lab to automate away that human error and mitigate that reproducibility crisis. And after a few semesters there, I realized that I couldn't solve this problem within the confines of an academic lab if I really wanted to have a massive impact and make it so most biology labs are fully automated. So I ended up dropping out to start Trilobio with about 1 semester left to fully automate the fields of molecular and synthetic biology with our modular Trilobots.
Okay, I have to ask what your parents thought about that with 1 semester left.
They were not happy. I'm Iranian, so education is everything. But I feel like in order to start a company, you do have to take some risks. I actually dropped out before we had funding, so we could have been homeless, but we got our first check. So it's a bit of a razor blade situation when you're starting a company.
I do want to ask about that. Like, what was it that prompted you to be like, I have to do this now. I can't wait. I need to work on this. Was there a moment?
Yeah, definitely. So I would see, these biologists, most of them were my friends. I mean, all my friends were biologists at the time. And I would see them so excited to change the world and become demoralized over time. Because in biology, what you're doing to get any sort of results is you're moving small volumes of liquid around over and over again. You're opening and closing tubes, working with hundreds of samples. And most of the time, you'll make a mistake. Like 70% of the time, you'll have to redo your experiment. And so and I would see these automation companies exist because there are automation companies in biology, but most biology labs have no automation at all because they weren't building for the biologist. So it would take longer for a biologist to automate an experiment than to do it by hand. So there were these companies, some of them are public, they're making hundreds of millions of dollars a year off of biologists who would buy their equipment and then not be able to use it. And the equipment would literally sit in their labs like a paperweight, which is what they call automation. They called it at the time. And so I would see people making money off of these biologists who were working so hard in the lab because they wanted to cure cancer or solve or develop a gene therapy for a rare disease. And no one was actually trying to support them with technology. Like the automation companies weren't trying to empower the biologists. The biologists didn't know robotics or computer science, so they were just spending their money on these machines without sort of any promise for like a better technology to support them. And so I was doing a Western blot in the lab, which is a multi-day genetic engineering experiment at Harvey Mudd. And my Western blot failed after I worked on it for 4 days. So I went into the bathroom and was like crying because my Western blot failed. And I was like, this has to change. And so I quit the research program and started trying to build robots with my co-founder, Max.
Who knew we would be grateful for a failed Western blot? You know, that's something I never thought I would say. So that's awesome. Andrew, you also came up as a founder, founded so many companies, like 7 companies, worked on design and product, and you were not a finance pro. So how did that
even a bro.
how did that shape you? How did that influence how did you get into VC from there? Tell us a little more.
Yeah, so I've started 7 companies. 3 were extremely successful, 2 were moderately successful, and 2 were extremely instructive catastrophes. I sort of, like a lot of people at Initialized, were pretty much all, I guess, non-traditional VCs. It was sort of, I don't know, serendipity that got me into it. And it all has to do with being nice to your interns. So Initialized Capital is founded by Gary Tan, who's the current president of Y Combinator. And I gave him his first job at my first startup. And he was a high school intern, and I was a college-aged dropout. I dropped out with 1 semester left as well.
What?
And my Swiss mother, Swiss moms are like the Persian moms, or the tiger moms of, I guess, Northern Europe. And she was unhappy. I made it up to her 4 years later when I paid off their house and got her a nice car and gave her something to tell her friends about. But Gary was growing Y Combinator, was growing Initialized. And because Initialized kind of came out of the YC mold a little bit, it's all about kind of finding extremely technical, often first-time founders, and giving them the sort of support and mentorship and coaching, and sometimes even sort of ancillary help on the business functions that maybe they don't have experience with or interest in. And Gary, kind of lured me into advising founders like 10 hours a month while I was still CEO of my last company that I abandoned to join Initialized full-time, but I'm still on the board. And that's how I kind of got into it. And basically, I tripped and fell onto a pile of other people's money, and I get to be a fairy godmother of sorts, and find amazing founders. And game sort of knows game. Find founders smarter than me, doing more important things than I ever did, and kind of shepherd them through our internal process, and hopefully fund them. And unblock our civilization on key points of constriction.
I love that. And so, to that point of finding the founders, tell us more about the story. Tell us your romance. How did you find each other? Who approached who? Give us more of the backstory.
Yeah, so we like when we met Andrew, we were basically like a seed stage company, but we had raised a pre-seed round of around $3 million, and our pre-seed lead investor, Bob Mason, which you know, he's on our board, and so he is a partner at a firm called Argon Ventures.
Bob's
and
great. He's the only Boston-based VC that reminds me of a Silicon Valley-based VC, which is good.
He is also a former founder, so those are usually some of the best investors, actually.
Note to the founders out.
Because they've done it before, they know what it's like to be in your position.
We've been awake at 3 a.m., totally
Yeah.
freaked out.
Yes, and they respond to emails at that time as well, unfortunately. But not that you should do that; you should sleep. But yeah, so Bob was good friends with Parl, who was an investor at Initialized at the time. But Andrew led their deep tech investments and robotic investments. So when I hopped on the call with Parl, Andrew was there diligencing our company. And I think the coolest part of when we met Andrew was that he instantly understood our vision and just completely understood our thesis and why we took the risks we did, why we were building hardware from the ground up, when it was actually like a really nuanced reason. You know, we're in a highly competitive space. There are automation companies out there, and we had designed our system to try to solve the problem of biologists not using that existing automation. And so we solved it through a lot of design decisions that Andrew just like instantly grasped. So that was really exciting. He was able to communicate our company back to us, I feel like better than I communicated it to him, which is great because that's awesome for raising from other investors as well.
And then Andrew, what was it like on your side?
I think I was familiar with the problem because my first wife, Asha, who's a rock star, I met her when she was getting her PhD in cancer biology, and I would bring her dinner at the lab, and I watched one of the smartest people I'd ever met wasting hours moving, trivial volumes of liquids around with pipettes, which are stupid. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess it's like paying your dues, but the number of years that these brilliant minds, kind of like when you look at like when geniuses do some of their most important work, it's in exactly the age band where these people are strapped, tied to a bench in a lab, like, being like squirt. I don't know what the noise is for suction,
That's
whatever,
pretty
but and it's just unbelievable, right? And then the issue with the reproducibility crisis around humans, it turns out, aren't great at doing that for long extended periods of time, and humans, make boo-boos. So I don't know, especially now that we're using AI to kind of, identify new novel compounds and that sort of thing. We have this backup, right? There's this backing up. There's this blocker at that stage, the experimental stage, and then also clinical trials. But we can't just make people take, drugs, right?
I also think, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Andrew, but Andrew, you studied like creative writing, right? In college?
I had like a bunch of weird degrees, like mostly humanities and history of science and stuff.
And your former companies were in like design a little bit?
All tech, some design. I did do a handbag line, quite successful, but pretty much all, other than that, all tech and a couple with hardware.
Yeah, I think that sort of perspective, that like creative perspective, is necessary for thinking of ideas that might impact the world a few years down the line, which is what's required when investing in deep tech companies. And because we have investors who are software investors, we have deep tech investors, like a whole variety of them. And I feel like that's unique specifically to like the way you invest and think about our company.
I don't disagree. I think also when you talk to like I'll just keep going. One of the things that really strikes me about really great founders, especially in highly technical areas where human beings are going to be using whatever it is they're building, having two great technologists is nice, but having one of them, at least one of them, also be kind of like the end user of that product or service is super critical, and it kind of echoes or substantiates a really important practice called design thinking, which was kind of coined by, I think, the Dobbins Group or something like that in Chicago, and then Mark Kelly, one of the co-founders of IDEO, Stanford has the D School, which is largely a partnership with them, and I think Stanford GSB, around really understanding what the problem is, who the end user is, how they currently solve the problem, and learning from that. Not some of the things that we're seeing now, especially with AI, which is a real problem, is, well, I mean, this is sort of a template, and I don't mean to disparage these people. Some of these people build great companies, but I think they're disadvantaged a little bit. And the scenario goes something like this. Two really smart kids who graduated top of their class last semester from MIT in software and computer science decide that they want to be founders because being a founder is cool. So they're like, okay, well, the current kind of important technology is generative AI. I'm going to build a generative AI startup and maybe go through YC or something. But what do I make it do? Well, I don't know. I'm a software engineer and I haven't really done a lot of other stuff. So I'm just going to kind of do this brute force kind of inductive, reasoning project. I'm going to find a thing to solve. And then they just sort of apply themselves in an area that they don't know or really care that much about. And that's really tough and hard. And I think going with the thing you love, or even, I guess in my case, if I wanted to start a robotics company, I could have looked at, my wife at the time, her issue, right? And be like, okay, well, I have a subject matter expert that has to help me for free. That works too.
I do hear this from a lot of investors that I work with, that my clients work with, is just the founders that are focused on the problem, that have some sort of particular insight into the problem, and they themselves can be an evaluator of whether the solution fixes the problem. That's such an attractive investment target for investors.
Amen.
Okay. So we're going to get into a slightly spicy question. Are you guys ready? Okay. So one of the unusual things about this fundraise that you may not know is that Trilobio had open litigation during and even up to the closing of their financing. Now, as a lawyer, you typically hear, founders typically hear, if you get sued, it's game over. Like, close up shop, go find another job, get a nice job at a company that pays money, and then save up for your next startup. But that's not what Trilobio did, and most investors would not touch a company in active litigation with a 10-foot pole, and that's not what Initialize did. So I'm not going to go into details about any of the litigation. We're not going to talk about it. I will mention that the person who sued this company ended up failing in their suit, and then the cross-claim resulted in them paying the company. So it was a great outcome. But
what's a cross-claim?
Cross-claim is when you get sued, and then you say, wait a minute, you also did terrible things to me. I'm going to sue you based on those things. So it's not always one way. And so when you sue someone too, keep in mind, if you have also not behaved properly towards them, that could come up as well. But in that situation, the company ended up being really successful. But at the time of the closing and during the diligence process, we didn't know that would be the outcome. So the question is, first to Andrew, like, what allowed you guys to see past the typical VC hating having litigation with the company? First, let's talk about that.
I do not have an MBA, and I definitely don't have an MBA from Harvard. HBS, the worst business school. Sorry if anyone went there. Stanford GSB, pretty good. I've had 2 lieutenants from there. They're great. But no, seriously, I think part of it is having non-traditional VCs who are founders. Like, founders are insane. We're deluded. We're risk takers. We're trying to do the impossible, right? We're heroes. And, what's a lawsuit? People who just run away from, oh, there's a lawsuit. It's like, all right, well, tell us about it. Like, who's suing whom and why, and you know what I mean? And we did enough diligence to realize that person was, forgive the vernacular, a piece of shit. And functionally and spiritually, just a terrible person and a parasite. I could keep going, but I won't. But it was baseless, it was horrible. And he grew up in Santa Barbara with rich parents, so gotta hate him. And maybe it was not Santa Barbara, Orange County, one of the two. And the other thing also is, some VCs, well, so okay, I'll just share. You guys will like this. There's two kind of founders. Actually, there's more than two kinds, but there's kind of like there's back in the day, when I started my first company, it was before the Social Network movie. It was before Zuckerberg made it like cool with parents to be a to be a founder. You kind of had to be a pirate, and you knew you were going to like disappoint and bother a bunch of people. And since then, largely because of things like YC, a lot of the people who were just always the really good kids who just got straight A's and everything, including the dumb classes they didn't like, they, basically have memorized a bunch of heuristics about how to be a founder. And sometimes they make amazing founders, but a lot of times they're not very fun to work with. So I am predisposed to working with pirates, and the lab story. So the important part of the lab story, Arvinda did a great job, except she missed the most important part. But next time she tells it, she'll get it. The most important part of the lab story is that when they so the way it went down is a few years into your tenure there, the administration of the university, complete rules followers, came to the PI, right, the primary investigator running the lab, and informed him.
Let's assume.
Okay, informed them that there was an employee of the lab that was not a student, an enrolled student, or faculty. And then it came out that, were you in high school yet?
Yeah, I was in high school.
Freshman, sophomore?
Early, like sophomore.
Okay, so that they were a sophomore in high school, and they're basically like, you have to fire this person. But by then, Roya had already demonstrated her utility to the team and become a beloved member and was like nominated for the employee committee and stuff and was like integral. So the PI went along, was like, oh yeah, no, we're going to fire the hell out of her. Damn sophomore in high school. And then proceeded to build like a special little, baby lab in the basement that she was then encouraged and allowed to continue to sneak into after class every day. So part of it's also just like, how good are you, right? How much of a pirate are you? Some founders are born to solve the problem they're working on, and Roy is one of those, and you can't let a lawsuit by a little parasitic nothing stop you. But I definitely had to do a lot of work internally to convince my colleagues of that, but they were convincible, and that alone is a huge testament to how some VCs are cool and others are not.
Yes, thank you. So we had some discussions about whether we would even talk about this because it's a very intense thing, and it's like all the PR people were like, maybe not, I don't know, how's it going to look? But I think it shows off Initialize as being somebody who's willing to do it, and also Trilobio for being a company that was willing to fight for what was right. Because there's a large, all the lawyers end up saying just throw money at the problem, settle, and it was kind of a sort of a moral stand, but also a facts-based stand. And so I did want to ask Roya a little bit.
I'm going to interrupt because there's one other thing that'll make all of you be like, yeah, I would have done the same thing. He was also basically saying, like, he knew you were fundraising, and he's like, I'm going to prevent you from fundraising unless you give me money I don't deserve.
Yeah. No, extortion. It was extortion, for sure.
Yeah, he's lucky he's alive.
So the question of Roya was, tell us a little bit about the legal journey with this lawsuit and with the company.
Yeah, definitely. And just to clarify a little bit of the story, they ended up offering to build a basement lab, but then we ended up just starting a research team where we welcomed anyone, regardless of their college degree or not. But yeah, Andrew's been encouraging me to talk about that more. It's actually got us more investment. So if that's helpful for your own journey and telling your own story, hopefully that's useful. But
it's not bragging if it raises investment. Okay.
But yeah, so in terms of legal strategy, so we were working with big law. We were working with like a big law firm that, really wealthy companies would work with, like multinational organizations. And of course, we were drawn in by the brand name as first-time founders. We didn't know like that you didn't have that there were boutique firms you could work with, and so these law firms, they charge a lot of money. Like they will do something that you didn't ask for, charge you like $1,000 for it. And so you can imagine.
And they'll put their associate, they put the most junior person they
Yes.
possibly can on it.
Yep, they put
So they
the
can
most-
learn.
Exactly. We were a learning experience for those lawyers, unfortunately. And then they'll bill you. Like the whole thing is like billable hours, or they will try to charge you for things. And then on top of that, because they are the junior associates, they're the junior lawyers, they're not like able to innovate in law to be able to solve your problems. So like Aravinda mentioned, they will like encourage you to do what everyone else does, which is pay the person off, even if they did something wrong, when that wasn't necessarily the right choice in our situation. And so, you know, we were working with Ropes and Gray, and I went to a woman in tech meetup, and I was complaining about the situation. I was venting, and it turns out the person I was venting to is a lawyer who could actually solve the exact problem I was facing. And we decided to work with Venturous Counsel because they were a boutique firm, and also they were specialized in working with startups. So they knew the issues we'd face. They knew we were like cash constrained, time constrained, we needed a fast turnaround time, and that we were dealing with something that we needed an innovative approach to solving. And so, you know, we were drawn in. But then by switching to Venturous, we were able to find litigators that actually ended up making the other person pay us out. And the whole case was resolved in our favor. And so we ended up closing the round, and we've been working with Venturous Counsel ever since. And I think the thing that really distinguishes working with a small boutique firm like them from working with big law is that like if we had kept working with the large legal firm we had been working with, our company would be under. Like we wouldn't be able to function paying that level of legal bill for so little work. And then we wouldn't, I don't think we would have been able to win our situation as well, because we were able to resolve the case paying very little money compared to like what people quote you. They say you need to pay like millions of dollars to resolve a situation like this, and we paid like not even close to that.
Thank you. So, I mean, it's not just the legal counsel, but it's also who you're working with there, and like, have they had experience? Do they understand strategy? Can they bring in the leverage appropriate resources? And we switched their litigation counsel because you have to have different approaches depending on the people. So one size fits all does not work in law. And I think that's the human element that's really important for folks to know. And also thank you for all the kind words. And then, yeah, let's talk a little bit about before money was on the table. When you guys were talking about investing, you hadn't yet invested. What were the things, obviously Andrew has talked about some of them, but what were the things that made you really interested in Trilobio? And Roya, what were the things that made you feel like Initialize was a great partner for the long term?
So there are a bunch of choke points within every industry, especially ones undergoing great transformation, that kind of slow down business, slow down progress, etc. And we're entering in an age, effectively we're about to enter the bio age, right? Like we've done IT, we're doing AI. When you talk to baby boomers about AI and why it's great, like the ones in the know, like Peter Diamandis and stuff, they talk about living forever. Ray Kurzweil, actually, he invented that. He's awesome. He also invented natural language processing, I think. He's a good engineer. And he predicted AGI by 2029. He's been right in almost all of his timeline predictions. He's a genius. Read about him if you don't know about him. Okay, very good. So one of the biggest challenges, though, is, again, like there are only so many tortured PhD students to move the liquids around and stuff. And we need to automate that, or we're not going to be able to take advantage of all of this stuff at the top of all this amazing, innovation at the top of the funnel. And I mean, just from first principles, what Trilobio is building is awesome, right? It's modular. It's end-to-end, lab protocol automation that is controlled via, basically a natural language. Well, not even natural, unnatural biologist, like their lab notebook language, whatever that is, biologies. And yeah, it's awesome. The other thing is once you can convert basically biological processes and stuff into digital instructions, you can then transmit those protocols between similarly equipped labs around the world. So one thing I think about is all the existential risk around AI, and it seems to me that one of the scariest things is biological warfare, genomically keyed custom bioweapons that go after people with blue eyes. They hate us. It's a mutation. It's not our fault. Well, it started out as a mutation. Now it's actually just sort of inherited genes. Anyway, and there's going to be some really gnarly stuff. I think about Aum Shinrikyo. You guys, some of you are too young to know about that, but it was a Japanese doomsday cult that did a sarin attack in the Tokyo subway back in, I don't know when, the 70s or 80s. It killed like 200 people. Like I mean, that's not a disease. Scary stuff's going to happen. We want as many people trying to defend our species from crazy stuff and crazy weirdos in basements making novel viruses, or even just like reconstituting bad old viruses like smallpox and stuff, or worse things. What's the worst virus?
Ebola.
Yeah, but that one burns out fast. What's one that?
Coronavirus.
Yeah, not even that bad. I thought it was going to be worse. Anyway, whatever. Trilobio world needs it. They're building it. Go team.
Thanks, Andrew.
No problem, Roya.
In terms of what drew us to Andrew as a VC, so the way, just to zoom out a bit, raising as a startup founder can be really hard. You have to have a lot of conversations with a lot of investors, and then also of course, be able to take rejection and just move on. But I feel with Andrew, he just instantly could I would start, I had my pitch deck, and what we're building is a highly complex product, solving a nuanced problem. But I had my pitch deck, and I started telling him what our company did, and then instantly he could see how our company could change the world in years to come. He saw the potential of the technology, and I hadn't really experienced that with any other investor. It took a lot more convincing and explaining, but it sounded it honestly sounded like he was the CEO and could pitch the vision himself. And I think that was really important. And then he also acts like a founder because he is a former founder and has founded multiple companies. And I think that's one of the most important things when looking for a VC is that they know what it's like to start a company and they've faced the problems that you're facing themselves. Those are some of the best investors that we've had and the most insightful, because when you start a company, you're going to run into a lot of crazy fires and problems, and you're going to be really you're going to be put in extreme situations, and being able to handle those is really important. And so being surrounded by investors who actually know or who have experienced the same situations as you, even if they're extreme and seem niche, could make all of the difference in the world. So,
and I also think there was strong conviction on Initialize's side, and that also helped clarify that this was a good match, right? They were willing to, deal with a tricky situation in diligence, around the litigation, and right. So I will say that I have one more question, because I feel like I asked a question that made you guys say the same thing over again. I'm sorry, guys, but it was also really good for everybody to really learn those lessons. Okay, I will say the round was oversubscribed. What were cues that you took from investors that made you think, maybe this isn't actually the ones we want to pursue?
Investors, signals from investors that made us not want to work with them.
Patagonia fleece jackets with their logos on it.
Okay, that's 90%. Come on, man.
Patagonia was the first client of my first startup, and so I know Yvon Chouinard personally. He's one of my idols. I worked with all my idols in my first company, including Steve Jobs, who moved us out here. We worked in a free office space at a fishbowl conference room in Steve's office for 9 months while we made money and then, looked for office space in the city. Anyway, just had to include that. Steve was cool. Yvonne really hates that finance bros from Ivy League schools are buying Patagonia gear and not like using it in the backcountry, instead putting their dumb logos on it and like walking around being jerks to people. Now you know.
He is a model person, I will say. Just the only billionaire that I like.
He invented that earth tax thing where they do a bunch of their profits go to the earth. Hopefully we keep it.
In addition to that signal, there's also, so there are a lot of investors who like haven't started companies. Maybe they just graduated from college and they worked at McKinsey for 2 years, but they give advice like there's no tomorrow, even though they've never like been in the same situation as you. I think like overly confident investors are really like a yellow red flag. I think investors who, I'm trying to think what else. Oh, they're really ego driven. Like if you feel like you're going to like walking on eggshells, like if you say something, you have to like consider their ego. That's not good. Like ego can be really bad for a startup, especially in employees as well, because you're going to be like giving feedback to each other constantly, criticizing each other's work constantly for the purpose of like building something that's, you know, greater than yourselves and your team and to have an impact on the world. And you can't have that impact if you are stepping around people's egos. I think also like investors, I'm trying not to get into specifics, but I've had an interaction with an investor.
Just use first names.
Just first names, not middle names, not. But I've had an investor where we had our Trilobot like in our office, and it was like calibrating itself using a scale. So it was calibrating its volume. It was pipetting onto a scale, and the investor kept pointing at the scale and being like, "That doesn't look like a big robot." And I was like, "That's not the robot. The robot is using that scale to calibrate. This is the robot." And then they like pointed to the whole thing, and they're like, and I kept saying like, "Oh, our system's vertically integrated. We built the system from the ground up." And they're like, "That doesn't look like it's built from the ground up." And like, that's because it's not. It's a scale.
Can you name the fund at least? What's a firm? What's the first letter of the firm?
No. I have to
How
be
many
the legal
letters?
counsel.
Aravinda's
Okay, legal
our lawyer,
counsel.
so she's
Legal
protecting
counsel
us
says
right
no
now.
thanks.
But it's if it's true, it's not.
Well, here's the thing.
Right?
This is the reason why not
does it rhyme with?
not to throw shade is if an investor gets a bad reputation, that may unfairly reflect on other investors and particularly companies that those investors have
This is why
funded.
you need to work with Venturous Counsel. Keep you out of trouble.
Aravinda's protected us from a lot of things.
You know, it's for fairness, we won't do it. But then it's like these behaviors to be aware of, so
We
you
won't do
guys
it on
can
the
be aware.
mic in front of everyone.
We won't do it. We're not going to do it today, guys. Okay. So I will ask, and then one thing I wanted to cue was that these guys got introduced by one of Roya's early investors. That is one of the greatest roles of investors, is to connect and open doors and make really strategic connections. So when you're looking at investors, think about, do they know the space? Do they know good people? Do their founders talk about them as connectors? That's a huge value add for investors that you can think about. Because I really think like founders have to be discerning when taking money. And it's so hard because all you want is someone to say yes. And yet, I joke about this all the time, it's easier to get a divorce than it is to get someone terrible off your cap table, okay? So practice safe cap table.
And
okay.
Also, just to add to that, because you just reminded me of something. So whenever we get offered investment by a fund, we do diligence on them. So we do backdoor references. So we get founders who they've invested in, and then we ask those founders questions like, how did this investor act in like the hardest point in your company? Like, what have they done for you? What value have they added to your company? And we also ask the investor themselves. We say, like, can you refer us to a few founders you've invested in so we can ask them these questions? And we did that with Initialized. All of their founders are very happy with working with them. And same with Bob and Andy at Argon Ventures, because if you have an investor that's not aligned with you, it can kill your company. And a lot of the times, companies have died because of that.
Here's the thing, you guys. You think it's hard to get money, but if what you're building is important and good and you are smart and impressive, you will get that money. Sometimes you have to talk to a ton of people to do it. a lot of investors think that their money that they can possibly give you makes them very important and also smarter than they really are. And what you have to realize is, even though it doesn't feel like it because you and your company are starving for those funds, money is totally fungible. Like, it's a commodity. So you really have to be picky, even if I know it's easy for me to say this, but like, and I know there's a lot of pressure to raise quickly and all that, but you're going to be married to that person. And they can be terrible. Series A, from Series A on, especially when they take board seats, like voting board seats, I've seen amazing founders and amazing companies be really messed up by putting the wrong person in that voting seat. So one other thing, this kind of relates also to what the question Roya answered about warning signs. When an investor acts as if they don't realize that their money is not, that they are not special because they can write a check, or thinks their money makes them special, that is a big warning sign. Because one, they're probably jerks, or it makes them cocky, and they don't understand the real power differential. Great founders doing great things that have a high chance of building multi-billion-dollar companies that could return the investor's entire fund are extremely scarce. They are the scarce thing, not the investor with a checkbook. And the other thing that tells you, if you get the impression they don't know that, is that they are stupid, and they are too stupid to invest in you. The way to win in whatever you do in life, unless I guess maybe you're like, you book supermodels, is to only work with people smarter than you. That was mean. There are some really smart supermodels, like that Hedy whatever who invented frequency hopping. Hedy Lamarr, amazing supermodel, actress too. Multi-something threat. Anyway, so always work with people smarter than you, and you will win.
I guess, like, just quickly, like, an example of this, if you can, like, put your brain into the brain of, like, a founder dealing with a really stressful situation, like, I can just picture, like, a stressful situation. Say, like, one of our robots is, like, throwing everyone's samples across the deck. Not that it would do that, but just imagine, like, and you're dealing with that, and the investor's like, why is your robot doing that? Like, you're a horrible founder. This is like, it shouldn't be doing that. And that just like makes the situation way worse. But imagine like an investor who finds the contact of the CEO of that company, like figures out a way to help alleviate that situation instead of like making it way, way worse. The investors who can, like, we've had investors alleviate some of the most stressful situations we've been in. And those are some of the best investors.
Talk about that. Like, what has Andrew done that surprised you in a good way?
Oh man, I think that I feel like because you have founded companies before, and just who you are, you can predict like where my head is at. So like when the diligence was being done on the litigation and he reached out and got the deal through, like, I mean, obviously that was huge. That was an $8 million funding round. So
the most important thing I did for Trilobio is forcing Roya and Max to start using Claude Code and Claude Cowork. Maybe not. I don't know.
And then Andrew, like, now that the funding closed about a year ago, or almost a year, how has the relationship been? What do you call Andrew for? Has Roya done stuff that's surprised and impressed you, or has the team? Like, let's talk about what it looked like post.
Impressed, yes. Surprised, no. I think we expect to be impressed perpetually, and the minute it stops, we're like, what the hell? We have office hours. I don't know how. That's pretty common, right? Do you have office hours with all your?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So we have office hours on a monthly basis or something
Yep.
like that, and it's just an opportunity for Roya and Max to meet with me and for me to ask them questions and to hopefully, I mean, my job's kind of to anticipate things they need before maybe they've anticipated it, because this is your first startup.
Yes.
Yeah. So my job is to kind of look around corners for them a little bit.
Okay. I want to get to Q&A, and there have been so many juicy topics that I'm going to ask one last question, which is, for the founders in this room that are pre-funding, what's one thing about this process that you wish someone had told you before you started it? And Andrew, you have to put yourself in the mind of somebody way back when.
I only, for the record, this is kind of, I'm outing myself, but I have only So 7 startups, we raised money once. So the goal is to sell your first startup for a lot of money and then self-fund like all your other stuff until you reach profitability. That's unrealistic, but awesome. But also just because everybody raises money, like don't assume you have to go out and raise money. And maybe for your first startup especially, like if you have multiple ideas and one of them will start generating revenue like relatively early, you could actually bootstrap to quite a high, at least bootstrap to serious revenue if possible, and then you can raise more on your terms at a higher valuation and be really picky and also just get like higher conversion rates, I guess. I don't know if that's helpful. Or
Yeah.
be born to really rich people.
Yeah, that's the piece of advice. Be a trust fund, baby. All right, Roya.
Yeah. I think that like starting a company that's focused on what you really care about, like that passion, can get you through some of the hardest situations you'll face. Starting a company can be a grueling process. It's not for the faint of heart. And the only thing that's ever gotten me through those situations is caring about what I was working on.
All right, we're going to open it up to Q&A so you guys can ask your burning questions. I know they're out there.
Cool.
Yes, please raise
Here you
your
go.
hand and Michael will
I'm gonna
come
give you the
around
mic.
with the mic. Mike with the mic.
Hello. My
Oh,
question.
please introduce yourself and mention if you're involved with a company. Mention the company name.
Oh, okay. My name's Armon. I'm a lab automation engineer for a startup in Sacramento, which is not in the Bay Area, and we don't have venture capitalists there. I don't think we have boutique venture law firms there. It's kind of sleepy. But my question is kind of about that to Roya specifically. Your story kind of started in Seattle, but now your company is it's in SF, correct?
Yeah.
How do you think that's affected your ability to do all the stuff that you do and get to where you are?
Yeah, so we actually started our company in LA in Huntington Beach, which is kind of sleepier than SF. And we moved to SF because of the robotics talent, honestly. Like, we needed people who are highly skilled at a wide variety of disciplines. And it's like more likely to find them in areas where they don't have to like physically move to work at the company. So it's been great. I don't think we would have had the team we have now, or even the space that we have now, if we hadn't moved. And even in Huntington Beach, you can't find like offices that are structured the way we needed them to be, because we build our robots in-house. So we have like a manufacturing space and an office. We have a demo space as well.
Andrew hooked you up with that space, did he not?
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
I did not. I hooked her up with Brian.
With Bri.
Bri,
But
the
see,
Bri
the
guy.
connections are super powerful.
Yeah.
Ask them how they're going to support you and what. The other thing. I want to revisit an earlier question really quickly. When you check, always ask to talk to founders, and also to Roy's point, don't just talk to the founders they give you. You know, a VC is awesome if they give you a list of all the founders they work with and let you choose. I think, did we do that? I hope I did that.
Yes.
Yeah. But when you talk to those founders, don't just ask them like, "Oh, what's it like working with them?" Be like, "Tell me about a time that things were really bad, and maybe other founders on your cap table were not helpful or told you something like, "You're cooked, dude." And what did so and so? What did this investor do for you? How did they help you? The key test, you guys, is what do VCs do for you? Not when things are awesome and you're growing at like 10x year over year, but when things are gnarly or really bad. Like, how do they help?
Yeah. And I also, another thing
Sorry, Aravinda.
that just to also point to another question you asked earlier. Sorry for doing this. But like another thing that I think Andrew did that was like really helpful was we had demos booked back to back, like day after day, barely getting any sleep. And then we had a board meeting and he convinced our board member to allow us to move it. So I was able to sleep that night. So thank you.
No problem, Roya. The thing is, people sometimes optimize for the dumbest stuff, and you just always have to remember what is the most important thing, right? Kind of one of the most important things is trying to get more sleep for all of us, by the way. But it's like the most important thing for you guys is to build and to sell, right?
Yeah.
Not like report to your investors.
That's not how a lot of VCs would think about it, but I think you can.
VCs suck. Just kidding.
We have a client called Hustle Fund that has anti-VC VC shirts. I feel like I'm going to get one of those for you. But I want to say in response to this question about doing work in Sacramento, the costs are also lower there. So there is more of an opportunity of doing a bootstrapped approach or doing it without. There may be grants that are available and less competition for them. So there are definitely benefits to being outside of one of those spheres. But the acceleration, I think, is really, and the talent is an important part.
Yeah, and actually, like all of our service providers, that's kind of a weird word, like our lawyers, our investors, are not that investors are service providers, but like
Oh, we
Your
are.
network.
You guys are
Your
the
network.
customer.
they're all like within walking distance of our office, which is really nice. And then because we're a robotics company, investors are more inclined to actually go and see what we built and base their investment decision on that.
Here's what's up, you guys. Arvind is super nice and polite, and so she's saying that SAC is an okay place, but any place whose abbreviated name is SAC is probably, you want to question that, right? But here's the thing, you guys. I grew up next to a cow pasture in rural Wisconsin, and my first startup, I went to UW-Madison because that's what kids who just go to whatever, where everyone goes, where you live, go. And then I dropped out and I moved to California. I moved here within a year of starting the company, right? If you live in an age when there is like a Renaissance era Firenze, right? Like Florence, Italy, and you're an artist, you go there and you work with Michelangelo and whoever else, right? Da Vinci. San Francisco, throughout my whole career, it sort of fluctuates with the boom and bust cycle, but honestly, this is the technology belly button of the world. And if you're a technologist building startups, and sorry I'm saying San Francisco, I just never brought myself to live down here. It's too suburban, but it's here too, Silicon Valley, whatever this is. Overpriced.
The Bay Area.
The Bay Area. We're all brothers and sisters. But like everyone from all over the world who wants to build this shit, pardon me, should come here unless they are like a national champion receiving direct non-dilutive funding in the tens of millions of dollars or euros from like Macron himself or whatever. We have one startup like that. But honestly, in the end, they probably should have moved here too. This is the place. You should all move here. If you don't already live here, you should tell all the smartest people we went to college with they should come here. We are the vanguard. We're building stuff. That is all.
All right, we'll go right here.
Get out of SAC as soon as you can, man. You belong here. We're your people. They're not your people. And also, anywhere where everyone has red baseball caps, not your people.
My name is David Noor. I'm founder and CEO of a startup called Avneer. I'm actually moving from Atlanta to here.
Yes, hot Atlanta.
Andrew, for more experienced or seasoned or lived experienced founders, can you comment on 2-3 recent investor meetings that have pleasantly surprised you? What did these founders do that really made you say, either they have their act together or they really are grown-ups that we want to work with, or...
Oh, like pitches?
Yeah.
God, I mean, I don't know if I can answer that question. I don't even know if I'm biased toward grown-ups, although it is easier to work with experienced founders a lot of the time because they've already made a lot of the mistakes. But I think maybe half of the people I invest in are first-time founders too. I think really what I look for is, are these people pirates? Are they going to take that hill or die trying? Are they deep, deep subject matter experts? I also have this conceit, and I think it comes from the creative writing thing, but one of my startups, our slogan was smuggling cool shit back from the future. And I feel like founders are itty-bitty little time travelers. And it's kind of my job as an investor to meet with them. They're going to tell me about the future they come from, basically their vision. And then I have to decide, well, one, I have to decide if they really are time travelers or just on drugs or schizoaffective or whatever. Or, sorry, an attorney would say, don't say that last word.
I didn't say it. I didn't
That
say
was
don't
cool.
say it.
But once I do that, I'm like, okay, are they from the timeline we're on, right? And I think you just kind of know when you meet people whose vision and ability to actually build and deliver on that vision is real. And that's just kind of like, and maybe it's being a former founder helps because you've hired thousands of people and you remember the ones that were really compelling in the interview and then ended up needing to be fired right away. But I think it's also just like passion. The other thing is compatibility. Like when you meet with these people, like you're going to work with them. You have to realize, like, is this a person I want to work with? So I think also like although I kind of like difficult founders too. I've had a lot of difficult co-founders, and they're some of the smartest, most interesting collaborators I've had. But really, it's just kind of like, do these people strike you as the smartest, best people working on this problem? You know, and you also have to meet with a lot of people. And then the last thing is, who referred them? Getting a referral. I mean, cold. I've funded people have sent me cold emails and stuff. But often then you're kind of looking at like credentialism and stuff. You're like, oh, where did they go to school? What do they do? But the best thing you could possibly do is get intros to VCs, good VCs. Well, first of all, the best thing you can do is approach or be referred to VCs that you know you've met people who have worked with them, and they're like, you have to work with that person. And if they say, oh, you have to work with Sequoia, that's not the right answer. They have to say, you have to work with this person at Sequoia. And then getting an intro from that person from that founder to that person is going to be really compelling for that investor. That was I answered kind of your question and some other ones too. Thanks.
I have something I want to pressure test. I tell my clients that if you're executing like at a high level, you can add investors that you meet onto like mailing like update lists. And it feels spammy, and yet it's a very clever passive way to show that like, I want to do X, Y, and Z in 1 month. And then after the month, you say, you know what? We did X, Y, Z, and A, B, and C because we're just awesome. And this kind of passive way of showing that you can execute in addition to all of the other stuff Andrew's talking about. Has that been persuasive when you've had that kind of slow drip of information from companies that are doing well?
I get a lot of email, and I don't read a lot of those. But I think some better, more responsible investors would probably get a lot of value out of that, and it doesn't hurt. Like, you kind of have to do a full
and
spectrum.
now you can just have the AI read it and tell you what you actually need
totally.
to know. There you go.
Yeah. The other thing, though, is reaching out, like having real conversations with them. Like when you have reach a major milestone stuff, even especially when you're not fundraising yet, just be like, hey, would love to take you out for coffee, give you an update, tell you kind of where we're at. And get some advice, right? People love giving advice. So like forming a sort of real or more than parasocial relationship with them kind of before you really need it, before it's purely transactional is good.
Also, like we did that with our investors. Like we tried to show a pattern of doing what we said we'd do. But I don't know if it was the emails themselves or just like actually just like doing what we said we do in the past that convinced them. But I was under the impression that they were reading the emails and that,
Most of
they
them
were
are.
affecting.
I'm just not a good person.
You are a good person.
That's not one of your strengths. You have many others. No, I think this is true that you're executing is what did it, but they may not have known about that if you hadn't been bragging about it. It's not bragging if it gets you investment.
Media coverage too, you guys. Like getting an email being like, hey, here's our update. If you're doing really interesting, important things, like try to get some media cover. Like, it's cooler. Like then you can like forward, like, look, we got into. I do a lot of aerospace investing, right? So it's like, look, Space News just wrote a blah blah blah. I mean, don't say that, but forward that. Be like, hey, we just did this thing. Here's an article about it. If you're interested, we'd love to get coffee. Blah. The blah is a placeholder.
More
Awesome. Let's
questions.
take a couple
there were
more.
some people up here too.
Anybody in the back?
Michael and way in the back.
Hi guys, great talk so far. My name's Jim. I am a physician turned diagnostics operator now, first time founder like you, Roya.
Awesome.
Building in the liver disease space, so saliva diagnostic point of care for liver disease. Fun fact for anyone, does anyone know how bad liver disease is right now, fatty liver in particular?
Super bad.
Super bad.
It's part
right?
of the
Bad
metabolic
news.
something syndrome.
Exactly, yeah. So fatty liver is now the leading indication for a transplant. So it's overtaken viral hepatitis and alcohol. So really bad problem. FYI, if you want to build in that space, I welcome you all. Question for you, Roya, a little more of a personal one. So we always hear about sacrifice, time, relationships, opportunity cost of other things. Has there been a sacrifice that kind of blindsided you? You didn't know you'd have to do it? And how was that journey? What was that like? How did you go through that process?
Yeah, man, I feel like, I mean, a lot of the sacrifices are unexpected. Actually, like, there are so many. I'm just like, I
Don't over glamorize it, Roya. Come on.
I mean, like, so like when I dropped out, my mom got really mad at me. So I don't really have a relationship with my parents, which is like a sacrifice to starting the company. Another sacrifice is like, you know, as the founder, as like the CEO, you're kind of like the bottom line. So if something doesn't get done, it falls on your plate, and it doesn't matter if it's 4 a.m. and you have coronavirus. So those are some sacrifices you have to make. There's also like being like a female founder. I've had investors like say to my face that I should make the CEO a man because that's the only way to raise investment. And so I was just like,
Were those investors men?
no, actually.
Are you? Oh, that's the worst.
That's bad.
That's actually just sad. Not even
It's sad. There have been men, but I was most surprised by the non-men. And so like you just have to, you know, I couldn't like yell at the investor. I had to just be like, mm-hmm. And then like end the call and be like, next. So that's kind of how I've had to like react to things. Trying to think if there's, I mean, you have to fire people as a founder.
That's the
and
most
CEO.
important superpower for any founder, firing people the minute you know you should fire them and not spending months being like, oh, maybe they'll be okay. Maybe it'll work out. Like you're not a giant company that can carry that extra weight. They need to carry their proportion of the weight of the company.
And I've had to fire people who are friends, which is horrifying. Obviously, I didn't expect to have to do that, but I did it because I didn't want the company to die. Because if you don't make those decisions, that's what kills a company. So, yeah, I could.
People don't want to suck at their jobs. And most people who are sucking at their jobs realize they're sucking at their jobs, and it causes them some psychic pain, even if it's not totally conscious. And ultimately, you're setting them free to go find something they can do and actually succeed at and feel good about themselves.
That's 100% true. And I will also say that although most people who are sucking at their job may psychically know it, they often don't know it if you do not communicate with them. And founders are terrible at communicating with their employees, especially when things are going bad. They're like, well, it's obvious. I swear to God, it is not obvious to the employee. So you got to like really over communicate if somebody's not. And, you know, I've seen people turn it around. I've seen people receive really direct, clear guidance and criticism and turn it around. But I've never seen
What
someone.
percentage of the time?
It's a low percent, but it happens.
4.
But if you do communicate, then they get it. And nobody does like sucking at their job. And they may just go off and find their own thing without anything dramatic happening. But you know what I haven't seen is somebody turning it around when they've never been told that they're not doing it right. I've never seen that. So just sharing.
Yeah. Agreed.
I'll take like 2 more because
Yeah,
the
the food smells
the
really
food smell
good,
is
guys.
intoxicating.
But these guys will be around. You can talk to them later as well.
When you fundraise, who built the product? Your product?
Great
Great question.
So, you know, starting a company, you have to have a really good team. That can also make or break your company. Who the employees are, who your co-founder is one of the most important decisions you can make. So I'm the CEO and my co-founder is Max. He's the CTO and he is a robotics engineer by training. And a lot of our company...
And by spirit. It's a spirit animal, a robot.
I'll let him know you said that. Yeah.
He Spice Spirit?
No, by spirit. His
Oh, by
spirit,
spirit.
animal is.
Oh yeah,
maybe
it's
a
like the
robot.
Mars Perseverance rover. Absolutely.
Actually, yeah.
But with like the Wall-E style eye.
His
like the
favorite movie is Wall-E. That's how I knew he was the right co-founder. No, so like he would be. I have to delegate if I want to raise efficiently. I usually have to delegate a lot of my work in running the company so that I can just focus on raising. Because what they don't tell you is that a lot of what makes a successful fundraise is timing, which like you'd think, oh, it's the product, it's the execution of my company and like all of that. It's who I hired. No, like literally like just timing things correctly can help you create momentum in closing a funding round. So he would lead the engineering team, of course, like when I'm raising, and most of the time. So
Really quickly, I'm going to say this. This is like a secret weapon thing that I've discovered for the first time. I've never seen it before. It may be a terrible idea most of the time. But one of my companies is a company called Starcatcher. They're building beamed space-to-space power grids, power constellations. They're badasses. And they pitched a startup to me. I was going to try to get it through our internal process. then found out that their cap table was all weird, and there were like these two older people who weren't really involved that came up with the idea that had too much ownership. So I told the CEO, go fix this like inverted cap table, and then I'll bring it through the process. Or if that doesn't work, and most people don't want to give up equity, if that doesn't work, come back and pitch another company. So they pitched another company, but something had changed. It wasn't just this is Andrew Rush and Snyder. Instead of just the irascible CTO, that's another thing. Always get a CTO. If you're not the CTO, always hire a difficult CTO who's very opinionated. That's a good sign. But anyway, he and the CEO, it wasn't just them anymore. They had a thirdling with them, and he was a former prop tech VC from New York City. What does he know about space tech hardware, right? And I was like, this is weird, but you guys are geniuses. I'm going to go with you on this one. And then seed round didn't really matter, sort of helped. But when they raised their Series A and later, having somebody who comes from the other side of the table, if you're a hard tech company that has to raise like a ton of money, having somebody in there to run interference and run the process internally for fundraising, because fundraising sucks, and freeing up like the CEO and the CTO to actually focus on the things that matter more, and then get dragged in when it's that part of that time in the process. I've never seen anything like it before, and like they raised so much money in this last round, and then got a bunch of interest from Cerberus, large like private equity hedge fund, whatever, founded by like InQtel founder and stuff. They wanted to put additional money in, so they're like, okay, cool, we'll just raise another like 30 million at $100 million more valuation, like in a kind of second tranche. I've never seen this before. I'm not saying you should all go find VCs as co-founders, but if you're ever presented with that, especially like a former founder CEO, and no, I'm not plugging myself, I'm good where I am. You should totally consider that. It's a thing I just learned, and might be recency bias. I apologize if it is and it doesn't work out.
All right. Let's do one last question. Who's got a good final question? It's a special type of question. All right. This guy's confident. You've had your hand up for a while, and I keep skipping you, so here you go.
Hey, Roya, Andrew. My name is John. I'm a biologist working in the life science automation space.
Woo.
So super cool what you're doing, and followed it from a distance. One, would love to hear both you guys' feedback offline to see if like we're cooked in terms of what we're doing. But as you sort of look forward in the automation space, obviously there's like a lot of different players now, Lila, Medra. Of course, like what you're doing is more modular, more deployable, right? In labs, there's more like centralized. But how do you sort of look at that field, and sort of how are you framing your story going forward?
Yeah, so love seeing all of the lab automation people here. Welcome. Thanks for coming.
Do you go to SLAS, the SLAS conference?
I did not.
Oh, you really should. It's awesome.
Some of them did. I met them there. Yeah. But you should go next time. Yeah, great question. So we started our company, before the Lilas and Medras came about. There's now this push for like physical AI, right? Like when we started our company, hardware was not seen as like a cool thing to start a company for. But now, because I think AI is making it so people question the competitive or the moat that these companies have, they're moving into like physical AI. And so then you see the rise of companies like Medra, Lila, like these sort of AI driven science companies. And so what we've done is we've just stayed true to why we started the company in the first place. Like we genuinely started our company to solve the problem of like the reproducibility crisis in biology. And then we did a ton of customer discovery to try and figure out like why is it that why is it that there are automation companies, but most biologists aren't using automation? And, it's because it would take longer for biologists to to automate experiments than to do them by hand. And so we architected our whole platform around that. We build the hardware from the ground up because we want to solve the affordability problem. And because that helps with the being able to achieve flexible full automation. And so all of our decisions are driven by trying to solve that problem and not necessarily by like the hype wave going around. And so we try to communicate that in our pitch. Of course, we weave in like market conditions into the pitch. Like we have a lot of people trying to build like self-driving biology labs with our platform, which is kind of a new AI thing. But the reason that people are turning to us for that is because our platform is like, we architected it to be the one that can help fully automate research and development, where experiments are constantly changing. And that's just like AI-driven science, and AI is iterating on variables for an experiment and rerunning it, and it needs something to plug into. But so we do shift it a little, but like we've been doing the same, like we've been tackling the same problem from the beginning, and of course iterating and adapting based on user feedback in the market and all of that. But I think that comes through in our pitch. And then also, one of our existing investors, Bob Mason at Argonne, he's helped us like frame our pitch in a way that's compelling to a wide variety of investors, because we're a software, hardware, biology company. So we pitched to software, hardware, and biology investors. And so being able to communicate with them is really important. And so he's been really helpful, because I tend to over explain. Like I want to explain everything, like all of the tech, and he helps sort of abstract that away and make it more punchy. So good investors as well really help. I know Andrew was talking about like co-founding a company with an investor, but if you have early stage investors who are really involved, you can get that advantage as well. Hopefully that answered your question.
Thank you guys so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
The people who had amazing questions, these people will be here, can connect afterwards. And in the meantime, there's a lot of food in the back, and of course, more donuts. There are drinks scattered around. And
There's actual alcohol on the premises
there's
this time,
wine,
yeah?
There's beer. We blinged it up this time, okay, guys? So really enjoy, and remember, find a friend at this. That is your homework assignment.
If you find two, it'll be non-linear, and then like that's even better.
Thanks, Andrew and Roya.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for the great questions.
Thank you for coming.
And thank you, Andrew and Roya, so much.
Thank you.